The Galactic Council chamber was silent as the human representative walked in. The air inside the circular hall was heavy with judgment. Hundreds of eyes watched him, some curious, some suspicious, and some even mocking. The chamber itself was grand and ancient, floating above a dying star, a place reserved only for the most powerful and respected species of the galaxy. Until today, humans had never been invited inside. But now, for the first time in history, Earth had been given a seat at the table. David Cole walked slowly across the polished floor, each step echoing in the massive chamber. He wore a dark gray suit, simple but sharp, and his face remained calm, even though his heart was pounding. He had trained for this moment for years. Every word, every gesture, every pause. He knew exactly what to do. Earth had sent its best, and he knew it. The delegates sat in curved rows around a large holographic map of the galaxy. Each representative came from a different species, most of them centuries ahead of humans in science, technology, and power. Some floated, others hovered, and a few pulsed with strange energy that made the air ripple. But they all had one thing in common: none of them truly respected humans. "Earth welcomes the invitation," David said as he reached the center of the room. His voice was calm but strong. "We're honored to be part of this council." A tall, thin alien stood from its seat. It was the Eldari ambassador, a being with glowing blue skin and 4 golden eyes. He tilted his head slightly, watching David as if he were a child trying to act like an adult. "You speak as if your species belongs here," the Eldari said, his voice echoing unnaturally through the chamber. "But you must understand, human, that this seat was not given lightly. The Council does not forget how recently your people were using fire and steel." David nodded slowly, without offense. "That's true, but we learned fast, and we're still learning." A soft laugh came from another delegate. The Coldari ambassador, a creature made of shimmering crystal and light, leaned forward. "Too fast, perhaps," it said. "Your species races forward without caution. You build weapons first, peace second. That is why we hesitate to trust you." David took a breath. "We build weapons because we had no choice. Peace, for us, was never a gift. It was something we had to fight for." The words made a few in the room shift uncomfortably. The truth had weight, and David had just dropped it quietly, but firmly. The Zoran representative, covered in armor that breathed smoke, slammed a heavy hand on his desk. "You say you fight for peace," he growled, "yet your ships grow in number. Your colonies spread without permission. Your satellites scan council worlds. You are not peaceful. You are dangerous." David looked at him. "Buy steady. We scan because we're surrounded by species with fleets that could erase our planet in hours. We colonize because our world is growing. We build because we have learned that the universe doesn't care about polite words. It only listens to strength." The room went silent for a moment. The Eldari raised his hand. "You will not speak to us with such arrogance. Earth is not yet equal to the races gathered here. You are here only because of our generosity." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. "Then let me ask, what does the Council want from Earth?" The delegates looked at each other. No one answered immediately. Then, slowly, the Eldari spoke again. "You will follow Council laws. You will disarm all nuclear and kinetic weapons. You will surrender your orbital defense platforms for inspection. And your military fleet will be limited to planetary defense only. These are the conditions." David stood silently. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He simply listened. And once they were done, he nodded once. "Understood," he said. The Eldari smiled slightly. He believed the humans had agreed. "But I will need to send a message to Earth first," David continued. The Eldari waved a hand. "As you wish." David reached into his suit and tapped a hidden device inside his sleeve. It was a secure, untraceable line. Technology the Council didn't even know humans had. The message was short, only 4 words. "Stage 2, begin now." Back in Earth's orbit, Hundreds of cloaked ships began to move, silent, invisible, deadly. Across the galaxy, hidden human fleets near Council-controlled systems received the same signal. Crews went to battle stations, weapons powered up quietly. No shots were fired, yet, but the pieces were now in place. David looked back at the Eldari. "Thank you for your generosity, but I must be honest with you." The room shifted. Something about David's voice had changed. It was still calm, still polite, but now it was colder, focused. "We accepted your invitation to sit at this table," he said, "because we believed we could work with you. We believed this council was built on unity, fairness, and strength. But now I see what it truly is." He turned his eyes around the room, speaking loud enough for all to hear. "It is a cage, disguised as a council. You pretend to offer peace, but only on your terms. You offer safety, but only to those who submit. You don't want partners, you want servants." The Eldari stood, angry now. "You insult the council with lies." David stepped forward, just once. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I've seen your council's peace. You let the strong feed on the weak, and you call it balance. You let entire species vanish without action. We read your archives. We know your secrets. We know about the Garen extinction, the Anari purges, the silent war with the Drell. Your peace is built on silence and fear." The room erupted in noise. Delegates shouted, cursed, demanded his removal. But David didn't stop. "We came here politely. We followed every rule. We waited for decades to be heard. And now that we see the truth, we are done waiting." Suddenly, all holographic displays in the room blinked. Every screen, every feed, every comm system was hijacked. The council's private network had been breached. Dozens of star maps appeared on the main display, all showing red marks. Each one a human ship positioned in perfect strike range of council military stations. "You didn't even see us coming," David said quietly, "because you never thought we were capable." The Koldari's voice was sharp now, almost afraid. "What do you want?" David looked directly at him. "Respect." The Zoran stood, his smoke growing darker. "You would threaten the galaxy to earn it." "No," David replied. "We would defend ourselves to keep it." The Eldari's voice was low now, unsure. "If you fire on any council world." "We won't," David interrupted. "Not unless you fire first. We're not here to destroy. We're here to prove that humanity will not kneel." Another long silence. The truth was, none of them had ever expected this. Humans had always been emotional, unpredictable, but they were supposed to be weak. Yet now, in front of the entire council, Earth had revealed its strength. Not through fire, but through preparation, control, confidence. David took one last look around the room. "This is the last time we come here as the quiet ones. From now on, if we speak, it will be as equals, or not at all." He turned and walked away, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. And from that moment on, the galaxy would remember. Humanity had stopped being polite, and the council had seen what they really were. The silence in the council chamber stretched long after David Cole had left. It was an awkward, uneasy stillness, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Delegates exchanged wary glances, unsure of how to react. The words he had spoken, so calm, so confident, echoed in their minds, but they didn't know how to process it. This wasn't the weak, fearful human they had expected to see. This was something else entirely. For the first time in ages, the Galactic Council wasn't certain of its power. The human had walked out, but what was left behind in his wake was a shadow of doubt. The message was clear. Humans weren't just another species to be ruled over. They were something new, something dangerous. The Eldari ambassador, still standing, cleared his throat. "We will not be intimidated by these empty threats," he said, though his voice betrayed a flicker of unease. "Humanity is a primitive race. No matter how many ships they have, they cannot challenge us." But as he spoke, His eyes flicked nervously to the holographic displays that surrounded the room. Earth's signal had already begun to disrupt their systems. A quiet hum filled the air, like the buzz of an insect too close to the ear. The Galactic Council was not used to feeling this kind of uncertainty, and it unnerved them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Koldari representative, normally a quiet, contemplative figure, now appeared rattled. His glassy form rippled with stress, the normally serene surfaces of his body shaking slightly as though in response to the tension in the room. "It is clear," he said at last, his voice cautious. "We underestimated them. I would not have thought a species so new could hide such power beneath a facade of civility." The Zoran, still angry, let out a deep growl. "I say we destroy their fleet now, before they have a chance to strike first. They are a threat to our very existence." But the Eldari silenced him with a raised hand. "That is not the way of the Council," he said firmly. "We do not respond with violence, unless provoked beyond measure. We must consider our next steps carefully." Meanwhile, on Earth, far beneath the ocean and deep within the fortified bunkers, the mood was completely different. David Cole stood in front of a massive screen, watching as human ships silently activated across the galaxy. He didn't look nervous or excited. He didn't even look like he'd just delivered a powerful speech. His expression remained calm, unbothered, almost detached. The wheels were in motion, and this was just the next step. Humanity had made its move. One of his aides, a young officer named Sarah, stood beside him, eyes flickering between David and the live footage from space. "The fleet is in position," she said softly. "We've launched the first phase. But are you sure about this? The Council, they're not going to let this slide." David turned to her, his face still unreadable. "They will have no choice," he replied. "We've given them a choice already. They can respect us, or they can try to crush us. Either way, humanity will make its stand." He turned his attention back to the screen. The Council hadn't seen it yet, but they were about to. The human fleet, now active, wasn't just a show of power. It was precision. The ships were scattered across the galaxy, each one hidden in the shadows of distant planets, awaiting their orders. Earth had done its homework. The fleet had been designed not to overwhelm, but to make a statement. They weren't just here to fight. They were here to survive. They were here to prove that humanity had learned from its mistakes and had the strength to ensure its future. David had been right all along. Humanity wasn't going to bend, not anymore. They had been pushed into a corner, made to feel small and insignificant by the other species of the galaxy. But no longer. They were standing up, finally realizing that their greatest strength lay not in the size of their armies, but in their ability to adapt, to learn, and to act when the time came. "Phase 1 is complete," Sarah said, glancing back at the monitors. "The fleet is in place, ready to engage at a moment's notice." David nodded. "Good. Prepare for Phase 2. Back on the Council's flagship, things were beginning to spiral out of control. The room of delegates was in disarray. Even the normally calm and composed Eldari was pacing nervously, his golden eyes flicking between his colleagues. "What are we going to do?" the Koldari asked. "They've shown us they can break our systems. They can strike at any time." The Zoran's grip on the table tightened. "I say we take them down before they have the chance. Let's show them what true power looks like." But again, the Eldari raised his hand. "No, we cannot react in haste. We must." His words were cut off as the lights in the chamber flickered. The room went dark for a split second before the emergency lights came on. The holographic galaxy map, once clear and vibrant, now displayed static. Panic spread like wildfire. "What's happening?" the Zoran demanded, his voice full of rage. A delegate from the Vexeri species, who had been quiet until now, stood up. He was old, his body covered in cracks, his face worn with the weight of centuries of experience. His voice was steady, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Something is wrong. We are not in control anymore," he said slowly. The Eldary's eyes widened as he looked at the screen again. Impossible. This cannot be. The human ships, those few that had been detected, were now showing up on the map. There were more of them than anyone had anticipated. And they weren't just a fleet. They were positioned in key locations, each one a precise, calculated move. Phase 2 has begun, the Coldary whispered, his voice tight with dread. They've launched the second phase of their plan. The room was filled with a tense silence. The Council had never been in a situation like this before. They had always controlled the narrative. They had always been the ones making the decisions. But now, they were on the defensive. They didn't know what was coming next. In the heart of the Galactic Council, fear began to spread, not from the threat of destruction, but from the realization that they had underestimated humanity. The veil they had placed over Earth, the assumption that humans were weak, naive, and easily controlled, it was all crumbling away. David Cole, meanwhile, was back at his station on Earth, watching the chaos unfold in the galaxy. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel triumphant. He just felt certain. They had made their point. Now, it was time to see if the Council was ready to acknowledge it. He had shown them what humanity was capable of. Now it was their turn to decide whether they would respect it or risk destroying the fragile peace that had existed until now. David turned to Sarah again, his eyes steady. This is just the beginning. They have two choices. They can try to crush us, and we'll be ready. Or they can sit at the table with us as equals. She nodded, her expression serious. And if they choose to crush us? David's face remained calm, his voice quiet. Then we'll show them what happens when you push humans too far. The Galactic Council had always prided itself on its ability to keep order. For centuries, it had acted as the ultimate authority, controlling the fate of countless species. But now, for the first time, the rules had changed. The unexpected human fleet had thrown their delicate balance into chaos. They hadn't expected humanity to be capable of this, of fighting back, of challenging the power that the Council had held for so long. And what was worse, they hadn't expected humans to be so smart. Back on Earth, David Cole stood in the heart of the command center, the room bathed in the soft glow of multiple screens and monitors. His eyes were fixed on the galaxy map, a holographic representation of the key Council worlds. Each one was marked with a red light, a silent reminder of their proximity to the hidden human fleet. A soft hum of tension filled the air as the human ships, cloaked and waiting in the shadows, prepared for whatever would come next. "This is it," David murmured under his breath. Sarah, the young officer who had stood by his side since the beginning, was beside him again. She had grown accustomed to the pressure, to the knowledge that humanity's future hung in the balance. She glanced at the map, her eyes scanning the positions of the fleet. "The Council hasn't made a move yet. Do you think they'll try to strike first?" David didn't answer immediately. He knew the Council's leaders were deliberating, trying to figure out their next move. They were faced with a critical decision. The entire galaxy was watching. The Council had always been able to control the narrative, to dictate terms. But now, with humanity's firepower on display, their confidence was faltering. For the first time, they didn't know what the humans would do next. "They'll hesitate," David said, his voice firm. "They have to. They've never been challenged like this. They think we're still just the weak species from the far corner of the galaxy. But now we're showing them that we won't bow down. We're not afraid to fight. Not anymore." Sarah nodded, but her expression was troubled. "But if they retaliate?" David turned to her, his eyes steady. "Then we fight back. We don't have a choice." She swallowed hard. "I don't think the Council will back down so easily. They'll strike with everything they've got." David's gaze drifted back to the map. He knew she was right. The Council's leaders had far more resources at their disposal than humanity could ever hope to match. But the key to their success wasn't in numbers. It was in preparation. The humans had spent years laying the groundwork for this moment. They had studied every species, every tactical move the Council had made. Humanity wasn't just reacting. They were playing a long game. Inside the Council chamber, the tension was palpable. The delegates were in disarray, each one filled with a mix of fear and anger. The Eldari, who had once held the most influence, was now pacing back and forth. His once confident posture had faltered. The Zoran and Koldari delegates, though still brimming with rage, had begun to question their next move. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was unsure of itself. "I told you not to underestimate them," the Koldari representative growled, his crystal body flickering as if it were vibrating with anxiety. "We've allowed this to go too far, and now we pay the price for our arrogance," the Zoran added, his armored fists clenching. "If we don't act quickly, we risk losing everything." The Eldari stopped pacing and turned to face the room. "We've made mistakes, yes, but humanity's aggression is not what concerns me." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "What worries me is what comes next." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They knew what he meant. If they didn't make a decisive move soon, humanity might take the upper hand. But there was something else. The unknown factor. Humanity's willingness to play the long game, to wait, to not act in the heat of the moment. It had thrown the council off balance. They had expected a quick resolution. Instead, they were now locked in a standoff with a species they had never taken seriously. The Zoran's voice thundered, breaking the tension. "Enough talk. We have the firepower. We have the fleets. Let's wipe them out now, while we still have the chance." The Eldari's expression hardened, and risk provoking them into full-scale war. "If we make the wrong move, the consequences will be catastrophic for us all." The room fell into a tense silence once more. The delegates were divided. Some were ready for immediate retaliation, eager to reassert the council's dominance. Others, however, were hesitant. They had seen the human ships. They had seen the precision and the stealth. Humanity had played its cards well. They knew this wasn't a species to be underestimated. "We cannot afford to ignore the threat," the Eldari continued. "But we must be strategic. We have to understand what the humans are truly after. Are they here to negotiate, or are they preparing for war?" The room shifted. The Koldari spoke again, more cautiously this time. "If they're preparing for war, we cannot afford to wait. But if they're here to negotiate, we'll have to find out," the Eldari said, his voice heavy with resolve. "Prepare the diplomats. We'll offer them one last chance to discuss terms, but we will not let them walk all over us. If they refuse to back down." He let the silence speak for itself. The room understood. This would be their last opportunity for peace. But if humanity didn't accept the council's terms, then there would be no more diplomacy. The gloves would come off, and the full might of the Galactic Council would be unleashed. Back on Earth, David Cole stood in front of the screen once more, the image of the galaxy stretching out before him. The human fleet was now in position, waiting. But the tension in the room was palpable. It had been hours since the Council had received their message, and there had been no response. That could mean one of two things. The Council was preparing to strike, or they were preparing for a final negotiation. David turned to Sarah, his expression grim. "They'll come at us. They have to. They can't back down now. But we're ready. We've made sure of it." Sarah looked at the screen. "Are you sure about this? If they attack, if they decide to destroy us?" David cut her off. "We're not here to destroy anyone, but we're not going to sit back and let them do it to us either. We've prepared for every scenario. Now we wait." Back in the council chamber, the Eldari stood before his fellow delegates, his voice full of the weight of centuries of diplomacy. "Prepare for the worst. But if humanity chooses peace, we will offer them a place at the table." As the meeting came to a close, the tension hung heavy in the air. The council was making its decision, and humanity was preparing for whatever came next. The game had changed. There was no going back. David Cole knew that whatever happened, humanity had proven its strength. They had shown the galaxy that they were not just a small, insignificant species from a distant planet. They had shown that they were willing to fight for their place in the universe, and that, in the end, was the message that would reverberate across the galaxy. The galaxy was at a precipice. Every species, every corner of space, seemed to be holding its breath as the situation with humanity reached its breaking point. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled with an iron fist, ensuring that no species dared challenge their power. But now, for the first time, humanity was standing tall against them, showing strength, resilience, and an undeniable resolve. The question lingered in the air. What would the Council do next? Back on Earth, the atmosphere was tense. In the heart of the command center, David Cole paced slowly, his thoughts swirling with the weight of the situation. His mind was sharp, calculating, but the pressure of this moment, of leading humanity into a confrontation with the most powerful force in the galaxy, was unlike anything he had ever faced. The screens around him flickered with data, fleet positions, and communication channels. Every move was being tracked. Every second counted. The tension in the room was thick, almost tangible. The final phase of humanity's plan was approaching, and the stakes had never been higher. If the Council didn't respond, humanity would be forced to act. "Sir," Sarah's voice broke the silence. "We've detected movement. The Council's ships are being repositioned." David turned to her. "What does that mean? Are they preparing to attack?" "We're not sure yet. It could be a feint, a show of force to intimidate us," she replied, her eyes scanning the data. "But if they're getting ready for a strike, we need to be prepared." David nodded. He could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. They had come so far, and now the outcome seemed inevitable. The Council had never expected humanity to act this way. Calm, calculated, but unyielding. Humanity wasn't just reacting out of fear or desperation anymore. They had taken control of their fate, and the consequences were about to unfold. In the Council chamber, the mood was grim. The delegates had gathered again, but this time there was a marked difference in their demeanor. The usual confidence that the Council's representatives had shown was gone. A sense of unease had settled over the room, as each of them wondered if they had made the right choice. The humans had outplayed them at every turn, and now they were on the verge of war, or worse. The Eldari stood at the front of the room, his gold-flecked eyes scanning the room of uneasy faces. His voice was low but steady. "We cannot ignore the threat humanity poses any longer. We have extended an olive branch, but they have rejected it. The fleet is in position. It is only a matter of time before we act." The Zoran, his dark armor gleaming in the low light, leaned forward. "We must strike now. If we wait any longer, we risk giving them the upper hand. We cannot allow them to challenge our authority." The Koldari representative, usually calm and calculated, now looked increasingly worried. His body vibrated with tension as he spoke. "But what if they're not bluffing? What if they truly have the means to fight back? We've seen their ships. We've seen their firepower. The question isn't whether we can defeat them, but whether we can destroy them completely before they turn the tide against us." The room fell silent at his words. For the first time, doubt had entered the minds of the Council. They were no longer certain of their power. The humans had shown them that they weren't just a primitive species. They were capable of incredible feats, and in the face of that, the Council found itself questioning whether the cost of war was worth it. The Eldari raised a hand to silence the murmurs of dissent. "We are the Galactic Council. We do not operate on fear. We have never been afraid of a species as young as humanity. But the question remains, what are they after? Why have they pushed us this far?" The Zoran growled, clearly frustrated. "It doesn't matter what they want. They've made their intentions clear. If they do not back down, we will crush them." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. The Koldari, however, seemed unconvinced. And what if they've already prepared for that? What if they've anticipated our every move? What if the human fleet is just a diversion? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The truth was that no one really knew what humanity had in store. The Council had underestimated them at every turn, and now it was too late to change the course of events. The war, whether they wanted it or not, had already begun. Back on Earth, David Cole stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, watching as the Council's fleet moved into position. His face was hard, his expression unreadable. The plan had worked perfectly so far, but he knew that this was the moment of truth. The Council had no more moves to make. They had been given a chance to negotiate, but they had refused. Now, there was no turning back. "David," Sarah said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "They've begun to mobilize. It looks like they're preparing for an attack." David's lips tightened into a thin line. "Let them. We're ready." He turned away from the map and walked toward the communication station. The final phase was about to begin. He had prepared humanity for this moment, and he knew they would rise to the occasion. It was a strange feeling, being on the cusp of a galactic war. But deep down, he knew this was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. "Activate the fleet," David commanded, his voice steady. "Prepare to engage if necessary." Sarah gave a quick nod, tapping into the command system. "The fleet is ready. All ships are on standby." David glanced at the monitors. The human fleet was smaller than the Council's, but it was compact and efficient, each ship designed with precision and purpose. The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They had learned how to survive in a hostile galaxy. And now, they would show the Council that they weren't going to go down without a fight. The ships, positioned in key sectors around the galaxy, were cloaked and waiting. Humanity's greatest advantage was its unpredictability. The Council had thought them weak, insignificant, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The Council's ships moved closer to their targets, their engines' hums vibrating through space like a great predator on the hunt. The delegates sat tensely in the command room, waiting for the inevitable clash. But in the back of their minds, a nagging thought remained. Had they made a fatal mistake? The Eldari's voice rang out in the chamber. "We are at the edge. No more hesitation. The time has come to act." But even as he spoke, a distant alarm echoed through the Council's flagship. A small, seemingly insignificant signal appeared on their screens. At first, it seemed like nothing, a glitch, perhaps, or an anomaly. But as they focused on it, the signal began to resolve, growing clearer, more distinct. It was a message. And this time, it wasn't from the humans. The message flashed across the screen. "We are humanity. We will NEVR Baki down." The words were clear, simple, but they carried the weight of something far more profound. The Council stared at the message, the full weight of humanity's resolve settling on their shoulders. The final pieces had fallen into place. The storm was coming, and there was no turning back.